Prudence means being sensible, thinking carefully through what will this mean for the community, what will it mean for the next generation. See, what the West has really done is rob its children and its grandchildren of the things that we've taken for granted.
I'm Dave Rubin, and this is the Rubin Report. As long as you're here, don't forget to click that little subscribe button and tap that bell over there so that you actually see our videos. Crazy, I know. All right. Joining me today is the former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, a relentless fighter for freedom, and the host of Conversations with John Anderson. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Great to be with you, Dave. It really is.
I am very happy to have you here because I'll start by saying that something that I'd never have told you in person, even though we've met a couple times. You reached out to me about 3 years ago, right when we built this studio and the show was taken off. There was a nice little bump in what we were doing. And you reached out to me, or your people reached out to me, and said, John Anderson, former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, would like to chat with you. He's coming to LA. And it was really the first time that I thought, whoa, this thing is seriously international, that the conversations that I'm having are seriously important. And we had a great breakfast where we talked about freedom and
we did.
Conversation and all of those things. And since we've done a couple events together. So I guess my first question is, you've been in this fight for a long time. When did you start becoming aware that there was something worldwide around having decent conversations that was sort of becoming the new way of going about discourse?
Well, I think my initial sort of concerns around freedom were largely economic. So I was part of a coalition government in Australia from 1996 to 2007, and we were a reforming government. Our emphasis on freedom was economic freedom so that we would not pass on debt burdens and lack of opportunities to young people. And that was my focus. I think for me, it was after the great financial crisis, and you saw the blame game started to really play out. And I started to see that we needed to make major adjustments to the way we ran our economies in the West. They're all hopelessly indebted, with the exception of a few places like Australia. But we wouldn't do it. We wouldn't own what we'd done. And you started to see the shouting become very shrill. Now, it hadn't started then, but you asked when I started to realise this is a real problem. It was about that point because I started to see that actually, understood properly in democracies, government's downstream of culture. Mm-hmm. And so is economics. And the whole Lehman Brothers collapse was about a collapse in standards, but again, you didn't have a grappling with what had gone on in terms of the ethics of it, bankers, instead of saying, what should I do? Mm-hmm. How should I behave? Rather, what can I get away with? How can I build a bigger bundle for me and for those around me and hang the people who bank with us and who trust in us and rely on us. And I started to think this is getting really serious. But then it was the nature of the debate, because it wasn't a debate anymore.
Yeah.
Now, you can't get good public policy without a good debate, and you can't have a good debate without a reasonable degree of respect for the other person's dignity and standing.
So it's interesting because I was a struggling stand-up when Lehman Brothers crashed, and I used to work at a comedy club handing out tickets in Times Square right on the corner. I think it was either 50th or 51st and Broadway. That's where the Lehman Brothers building was, and it was this huge lit up, massive digital display building. And I remember when it went down. It seems like another lifetime ago. But what's it like to be one of the guys going, hey, everybody, we're about to go off a cliff here. I mean, that's not what politicians want to do. They want to always give everybody all the things that they want.
That's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is no doubt we need to understand that a lot of this rot started in the 1960s. We gave up talking about, the big sort of meta-narratives. Who am I? What am I? Where do I fit? How does the world work? It's all too hard. And you can understand that in a way. We've seen horrific wars. We've seen the Great Depression. Let's live for us now. Mm-hmm. And in an age of cheap credit, we started to rack up debt right across the Western world. It's not as if I'm singling out one country, your country, or my country. We're all into it.
We've all done it.
We've all done it.
Yeah.
And here's the rub. In a democracy, so you can say to Mr. Congressman, now listen, I'll give you my vote if you promise me X, Y, or Z. And Mr. Congressman might know instinctively if he knows his stuff. You wonder how many of them, well, I shouldn't single out American Congress,
right.
But a lot of politicians don't know as much as they should.
Yeah.
They might, if they were honest, say, look, that is not a good way to do it. We can't afford it. It'll come against your children and your grandchildren. unfunded liabilities. It turned out to be a nightmare. But we've said, no, you don't get over that. All right, I'll give it to you because it's on the never, never. And kings from of old have known that until the credit runs out, you can live pretty well. But when the credit does run out, it's a very different story. So it really, I think it has its genesis in the 60s and this idea that it's all about me. I will do what I like with my life, etc., etc., etc. We abandoned the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. It's all about me. Now, of course, most people don't live like that. But that became the sort of prevailing ethos.
Right, we would never live like that in our own lives, right? I mean, sometimes you do. Most of us have been in debt at some point or racked up too much credit card stuff or whatever it is, but you would never just, well, you can't. I mean, that's the thing. As an individual, you can't keep just getting more credit as you keep not paying things. But somehow in governments, we seem to be able to do that.
Well, I think that, it takes two to tango. I think the electorate, the voters, if you like, have demanded too much. But politicians who should have known better right across the West have not been prudent enough either. And there's an old-fashioned word called prudence. It was a classic virtue. It went along with integrity and courage and all of those other ones. And prudence disappeared. And the story of Lehman Brothers in many ways is a disappearance of prudence. Prudence means being sensible, thinking carefully through what will this mean for the community, what will it mean for the next generation. So what the West has really done is rob its children and its grandchildren of the things that we've taken for granted. And look, I don't know what privilege is because you can adjust it 1,000 ways, but as I understand it, I think you and I would both say we're very, very fortunate people. We've grown up in free society. We've never really wanted and so forth, but those things should never be taken for granted.
Do you see a direct connection then between us no longer asking the big questions in the 60s to then directly to, well, politicians then just say, here's more, here's more, here's more, here's more, because the people no longer have the tools to understand why that's actually not good. That actually really explains what's happening here in America, I think.
Yeah. Well, I do think that. I really do think that. I think we are paying a terrible price, is my personal view, for washing out. You see, I think for a long time, I don't think, particularly in my country, it was ever particularly religious, but there was an idea that, broadly speaking, the Christian view of the world, love your neighbour, you're accountable to a higher authority. You may dislike your neighbour, but they still have value and worth and dignity, and I have to respect that. Broadly seen as true. Then it just became seen as one of many truths. Now, of course, we know there's open hostility to traditional underlying beliefs in the West on the part of, I don't know what you call them. Do you call them a lot of the intelligentsia or the politically correct or the people who have the microphones or the elites, whatever word you want to use? There's enormous hostility there that says this stuff's dangerous and you shouldn't expose your children to it. But what's the substitute? What are we putting up instead? The idea of radical autonomy? I will hazard a guess that you would understand exactly what I mean if I said to you, I don't think you ever find yourself in yourself. You actually find yourself by relating to and serving others and being considerate and in looking to see where you can make a difference. Not just for yourself all the time. Self-centeredness just destroys.
Well, that's the, I guess, real irony of the situation. As we've removed some of these traditional beliefs, we've replaced them with authoritarian movements. They don't seem to be replaced by freer movements. If there was something so wrong with them, you would think, all right, well then freedom will replace them. But no, it seems to always go the other way.
Well, very much so. I mean, I'm a great believer in the freedoms. I don't think you can ever unbundle them. We've had a debate in Australia, what's the first freedom? And people say, well, obviously it's freedom of speech, they say, because that's the one by which you defend all the other freedoms. But I think I want to join with Frank Furedi. Now, and that's an interesting story in itself. I would be seen as, broadly speaking, classic liberal stroke conservative. He would not, he was a student radical in the 60s. Wonderful and delightful man. If you've not had him on,
no, I haven't.
You should get him. Frank Furedi, Kent University. But he would say, if I said to him, I said to him, do you think freedom of speech is the first freedom? He said, no. He said, you should understand with your Christian convictions that actually it was freedom of conscience. Our forebears were burning one another at the stake. A dreadful, cruel, appalling thing to do to another human being because they had a minority view. And after a while, people sort of said, well, this isn't very consistent with Christian charity and it's pretty barbaric and it's stupid because the person with a minority view today that we burn at the stake may in fact be part of a movement that tomorrow is in the majority.
Do you sense that's sort of where we're heading right now?
That's where I'm going.
Yeah.
It really worries me there's an aura of triumphalism.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.